Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in this Microsoft Ignite Ask the Expert panel. My name is Abhishek Hemrajani. We are excited here to have you here. We have an interesting lineup of experts waiting to answer your questions. Let's quickly get started on how do you get to ask your questions to the experts. Use the chat window to ask your questions. Your questions will appear to all attendees and will get approved by a moderator once they are approved. You can upvote any questions that you're seeing in the approved chat. So the upvoted questions will get picked up by the live experts to answer. We will answer questions verbally, but then also use our chat window to respond to questions. We have many experts and our MVPs waiting online to help you with any questions that you may have. Please remember that this session is being recorded, and we'd appreciate if you adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct for Microsoft Ignite. With that, let me introduce you to your experts. As I mentioned, my name is Abhishek Hemrajani. I'm the Group Program Manager for Azure Migrate and VMware. We also have Bharat Sivaraman, who's a Senior Product Manager on Azure Migrate. We have Christina. She's a Senior Software Engineer on the Azure App Service team. You should ask her about migration of your .NET apps over to App Service. She's the expert for it. We also have Natasha Verma. She builds the entire Azure App Service platform capability. So anything that you'd like to learn more about App Service, our PaaS offerings, Natasha is the person for you. We also have Anant Sundaram. Anant is a director in product marketing and an expert on the Azure Migration program. So if you'd like to hear more about how Microsoft can help you with your migration, Anant's your guy. And then finally, we have Raj Pochiraju. Raj is from the Azure data team and is an expert on migration of databases from on-premises to the cloud. So if you have any questions about migration of SQL or Oracle, Raj is the person who can help you with those questions. Now, before we actually get to the questions and bring in our experts, let me quickly talk to you about what are we doing systematically with our migration program. Now, migration to us is about how do we help you with the process, how do we help you with programs, and how do we help you with our product offerings. So when it comes to process, you should be looking at the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. That's proven guidance to help you accelerate your cloud migration journey. When it comes to program, you should know about the Azure Migration Program and the Fast Track for Azure program. Together, these programs and our partners around the world can really help you with your migration process. And finally, when it comes to product, you should be knowing about Azure Migrate. That's our central hub for migration. But we are also heavily investing in Azure Lighthouse and Azure Arc to help extend your management and migration scenarios. Now, when we built Azure Migrate as the hub for data center migration, we pivoted around 4 key investments. The first, we wanted Azure Migrate to be the single place where you discover all your key migration scenarios. For every migration scenario, we have integrated discovery, assessment, and migration capabilities. We've built Azure Migrate such that it is powered by Microsoft, but it's extensible with our integrated ISV partners. And finally, Azure Migrate is that one centralized migration repository where you can look at all end-to-end progress related to your migration projects. Now, before we get into the panel discussion, let me quickly tell you some key migration scenarios that you can discover today in Azure Migrate. You have coverage for migration of Windows and Linux. These could be VMs running on VMware or Hyper-V, or these could be physical servers or VMs sitting in AWS or GCP. You have coverage for migrating SQL and other databases. You can move your block and object storage to the cloud with Azure Data Box integrated in Azure Migrate. We also have coverage for migrating virtual desktops over to Azure or migration of web apps to Azure App Service. With that, here are some questions that you can ask us, but I'm going to quickly jump to the Q&A window to see if there is something that you'd like us to address first. Awesome. You know what? I'm going to start off by bringing in Anant. And I think Azure Migration Program is such an important program that, I think our customers should know about everything that Microsoft can do to help customers accelerate migration with the AMP program. Anant, you want to start off by having a conversation on that?
Sure. Thanks, Abhishek. So Azure Migration Program is one single spot where you can say, hey, I need help, right? And we as cloud providers or as Azure feel like a lot of customers are asking us for prescriptive guidance on the overall methodology and then the actual work of performing an assessment or doing a migration, and then as well as bringing in some specialized partners who can stay with you even beyond the work that we would do along cite them for you, right? So that's kind of, in summary, what the Azure Migration Program does. And within the Azure Migration Program, we actually support a variety of your migration scenarios. You can say, I want to migrate a VM or a set of servers, right? Or you can say, I've got a bunch of .NET web apps that I'm trying to move. Or you can even tell us, hey, I want to move a bunch of VDI infrastructure that I'm running on premises. Or you can even tell us, I want to move some databases that I'm running on premises, right? So it supports a wide variety of scenarios. So I would encourage you to go to azure.com/amp. We've got a simple nomination form. We ask you a few questions to just qualify you and figure out what you're trying to do. And then we'll just connect you with the right set of Microsoft experts as well as partner experts, and off you go to the races. So that's kind of in summary what the Azure Migration Program does, and I welcome additional questions.
Amazing. That's great info, Anand. This next one, I'm going to send it to your way, Bharat Sivaraman. And this is coming from the chat window. Can you use Azure Migrate to move a server with initial copy of server data being done with Azure Data Box offline, and then keep the server updated with syncs until you cut over?
Yeah, thanks, Abhishek. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and one we get to hear quite often. Currently, that's not something that's supported with the Azure Migrate server migration tool, and the reason for that is that while the Azure Data Box solution is kind of like a gateway for you to see data offline, oftentimes what does tend to happen is by the time the data is seeded, your server is already churned so much that you pretty much lose that advantage of, or the perceived advantage of maybe doing incremental things on top of that offline data copy. In effect, what tends to happen is by the time the data is copied over, you've already transmitted so much more Delta data that the offline seeding process in some sense becomes redundant. So that's, while this has been a popular ask, it's not something that we currently have, but it's something we'll continue to kind of explore to see this value in doing. But on the other hand, I think what I do want to add is we've been making a lot of enhancements in the server migration tool itself. So the velocity or the speed at which you can actually do that initial replication over the wire has significantly improved with all the investments that we've been making in terms of how we can optimize the data transfer and how we can compress the data before we send it over into Azure. And with some of the other additional enhancements that's coming, especially with your ability to use express out connections to move the data over the wire, and now particularly with private endpoints, that's only going to become a lot more simpler. So I think you more and more as you go, you'll find that that perceived time that it takes to actually move large volumes of data is not going to remain as much, and we're kind of narrowing the gap. So hopefully that'll help you move these virtual machines move these servers much faster without necessarily having to seed things offline.
Awesome. Thanks, Bharat. For this next question, even though a portion of it has been answered on the live chat, I'm going to invite Christina, Bharat, and Raj to create a composite answer. And I'm going to, while the question directly talks about migrating VMs from VMware over to Azure, let's play out a canonical app when we say a VM. So let's say we have a .NET app running on a VMware VM on-prem, and the .NET app is using a SQL backend. Could the three of you, maybe starting with Christina, suggest some migration options for that .NET running backed by SQL in a VMware environment? If it were going to Azure, what different options could be available, and what would be the best way to migrate?
Yeah, well, to start looking at it from kind of an app services side, one way to do it would be to move kind of the pieces into those corresponding services in Azure. So for example, you could take the application part and use tooling that we have available, such as the Azure App Service Migration Assistant, to find that application and move it into App Service and find out if there's any big roadblocks along the way or things that you would need to change, or if it's just fine to lift and shift as it is. Or there are also a bunch of other methods. If you, for example, use a GitHub or a CI/CD pipeline, you can use that as a way also to get into App Service to move the application part, and then separately move the database into Azure. And I think for that point, we will have Raj talk about it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Christina. So when it comes to migrating your databases that are serving the .NET application, there are multiple options that are available on the Azure SQL. And then depending on how ready your application and databases migrating to some of these options, and also what is really driving your migrations is also play a significant role. When it comes to Azure SQL, we have SQL servers which are running on the VMs. If you really want to do a true lift and shift migration and minimize the number of changes that you may have to make to your applications and database schema to make it ready for the SQL Server PaaS as a service, then you can simply migrate to SQL VMs. But if you really want to maximize your cost savings and bring all the efficiencies into your applications, then the other options are, Azure SQL Database Manager instance, which provides close to 100% compatibility with your on-premises instance model. And then also you can consider migrating to Azure SQL DB Singleton database, or if you're really serving multiple databases, then you can also consider Elastic Pools. So the best way to determine which target Azure SQL is a good fit for you, you can use Data Migration Assistant tool, which is tightly integrated with Azure Migrate service that will really assess your databases and applications and really give you a good report. Are there any migration blockers migrating to various platforms, or which platform is ready to migrate in terms of the Azure SQL, and what would be the right skew that you can migrate, which really meets your performance needs and availability needs when you migrate to the Azure SQL. So there are a bunch of options there, but our tools really help you to determine that as well at the same time. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may kind of add to that, I think Christina and Raj kind of covered how you could take that application, potentially modernize pieces of it, either by refactoring or rewriting the application, or in other cases not actually doing so much, but using the readily available tools with the App Service Migration Assistant and move those applications over. The other option that you always have is to just run them on virtual machines in Azure, and that you can definitely do with a lift, optimize, and shift kind of approach that you could do with the Azure Migrate server assessment and server migration tools. So that's obviously going to be like one of the easier, faster options for you. But moving to a platform like App Service obviously brings a lot of these great advantages, especially if it's a web-based application. The platform is purpose-built to be able to let you run web-based applications. Takes away a lot of the management overhead, and you can do that very easily with a tool like App Service Migration Assistant, right? With minimum code changes. So that's definitely one other option that you can consider. Increasingly, a third option that we kind of starting to see or start making available also is the ability to kind of take some of this and run it as containers. And I know the App Service team has actually just gone generally available with Windows containers and App Service. The same Windows containers is now also generally available with on AKS, and that could be a third option as well, as you kind of think about how do you take the application tier of these applications and move them into Azure. For example, if you're looking to run this in AKS, and this is probably a good option only for those customers who are standardizing on AKS, right? Because web-based applications probably running it on App Service is a no-brainer for you. But if you wanted that choice, that's also available now to you with the preview that we have in the Azure Migrate tooling that can actually help you take a existing application or ASP.NET application, containerize it, and potentially move that over into AKS. So a few different options for you. Now, in terms of which one is best for you, I think your mileage may vary depending on what are the kind of outcomes that you want. But yeah, I'd say App Service is probably kind of the best option for you in terms of minimal modernization and the advantages that you get in terms of being able to do away with some of that management overhead. But there are certainly other options you could consider as well.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Christina, Raj, and Bharat. I think that was a very useful question and a very detailed answer. Thank you so much. I'm going to take these next two myself. I see them on the chat window, and I think they are quick answers that I can quickly get out of your way. The first one, it says that Migrate has now been acquired by Microsoft, so will it be made available to all customers for free around the world? So our primary tooling for discovery, assessment, dependency mapping, migration continues to be Azure Migrate. It's already built into your Azure subscription, and it's available for free in all geographies. Migrate continues to become available through the Microsoft Solutions Assessment Program. So you may want to check out that website to understand more about the Microsoft Solutions Assessment Program to figure out if you're eligible for a solutions assessment engagement. So that's our distribution model for Migrate. The one thing that we are starting to do, since nobody's asked me the roadmap question, I'm going to go ahead and say it myself. The one thing that we've started to do, it's very obvious, we're going to start taking pieces of the Migrate tech and bring it natively into Azure Migrate. We are starting off our work on bringing the SQL portion of the assessments more natively into Azure Migrate. That's something we are super excited about. You should be hearing more about that from us in the coming months. But that's the plan with the Migrate IP that we've acquired. The next one talks about how do you think about migrating these monolith apps over to Azure and how to factor in app dependencies? Again, great question. So one thing that if you haven't already tracked at Ignite, we announced a 10 times increase in the scale of our agentless application dependency mapping feature. So if you're using Azure Migrate, you can now inventory all installed software on your VMware virtual machines. You can also create dependency maps. Now, these could be across different apps or the different tiers of the same app. And you can do so for 1,000 VMs at the same time without installing any agents. So that's where I would start if I were to figure out how do you start migrating these complex monolith apps and understanding them a little better as you perform the migration. So for this next one, Raj, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. I know we spoke a lot about SQL. While I don't necessarily see the question on the chat window, I'm personally very curious. What are we doing for non-SQL databases migrating over to Azure? What kind of tooling guidance and tips do you have for our customers who are on the session?
Sounds good. So for non-SQL, we have a support for migrating from open sources databases like PostgreSQL, and then the MySQL that you can really migrate to the Azure database for PostgreSQL and MySQL respectively. And we're also seeing a lot of customers are migrating from Oracle to PostgreSQL as well on the Azure, because the thing is Oracle is PG is the most compatible version when compared with other databases migrating from Oracle. We can also migrate from DB2 to the SQL Server workloads as well. So we have a bunch of heterogeneous sources that we say that you can really migrate from those sources to the Azure. So while we are going to be tightly integrating all these migration scenarios into Azure Migrate at some point of time, while we are doing it in SQL Server, like Abhishek mentioned, the tools that you can really use is SQL Server Migration Assistant tool that really help you to do the heterogeneous migrations, especially with the heterogeneous migrations. When you're coming from a different database platform, the schema conversion is very important, very critical stage. And that's where a lot of our customers spend a lot of time. So what we did to make that phase really easy for you is we completely automated how you can really convert a schema that is coming from a different database platform to Azure SQL, PostgreSQL, and then open source SQL. So you should use SSMA tool to do the schema conversions, do the analysis and do the schema conversions. And for migrations, you can still continue to use Azure Database Migration Service to migrate all these databases which are pertaining to heterogeneous to non-SQL databases. So DMS service really supports a lot of these source and target pairs actually. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Raj. One more question I see in the chat window. What's the maximum size that a migration project can have? How many VMs, DBs, locations? You name your limit, we'll scale, Ankit. Bring it. Yeah. We are happy to scale to whatever number you want us to scale. The platform supports it, our tooling supports it. Yeah. We're excited. This next one, Bharat, I'm going to send your way. What are the new features, improvements for bare metal migration to Azure?
Sure. So I think the server migration stack, I think one of the things that that we've done is we've added last year that we did was we added the purpose-built migration tool for as part of Azure Migrate. Until then, previously customers were using the Azure Site Recovery tool, which is also a great tool for migration to kind of accomplish a lot of these migration projects. What we did with the server migration tool is we've given you options for to migrate from your VMware environment into Azure, to migrate from your Hyper-V environment into Azure, or migrate from just about any other environment, right? Be it bare metal or running on any other cloud. So I'm going to kind of take this question and expand the scope a little bit, talk not just about bare metal capabilities, but also talk a little bit more broadly, because there's a whole bunch of enhancements that we've added to the server migration tool in time for this particular Ignite. So in terms of capabilities that we've added in the server migration tool, one of the things that we've done and we've been getting a lot of asks for is the ability to kind of take advantage of some of the modern newer features, native Azure platform features that you can use to achieve better reliability, better security, better resiliency for your apps. So in line with that, what we've now done is you can not just migrate your servers into Azure, but as part of the migration, you can actually choose to place your virtual machines in a particular zone. So that way, if you're running apps with say multiple frontier servers on-prem, you could actually take them, and when you migrate them, place them in different availability zones and then put a load balance in front of it. That way you kind of get resiliency out of the bat when you after you migrated into Azure. In a similar vein, we've now also added support to let you migrate UEFI machines to Azure Generation 2 virtual machines, and this is across Windows and Linux. And what that means is you no longer need to convert the operating system boot type prior to the migration. In addition to that, we've also increased the scale or limits for data disks, so you can actually now migrate servers that have large disks, those large databases that with data disks up to 32 terabyte. We've added support to natively install the Azure Migration, the Azure VM agent as part of the migration without you having to do anything manually. So once the migration is complete, you're automatically set up for success in Azure with the ability to kind of snap on management features through Azure policy and such. And finally, the automation support is something that we're also consistently enhancing, and that's one more thing that we kind of recently released. So a whole lot of investments going into the tool, and we kind of continuing to innovate to help make that migration process seamless and faster. And this is being made available across all of the various platform types and stacks that we support in the server migration tool.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, Bharat. For this next one, I'm going to invite both Natasha and Christina. Just like Bharat recapped everything that's new with our migration tooling for servers at Ignite, what are the new capabilities that our customers should know about the app service platform or anything related to migration during this Ignite? So maybe we could start with you, Christina.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned the Azure App Service Migration Assistant earlier, and that's been around for a while for migrating .NET applications, PHP applications from IIS servers, or for some help moving Docker containers from Linux. We've expanded it a little bit to make it a simple kind of click-through experience to migrate Java applications running on Tomcat servers, either on Windows or on Linux machines, and get those in a simple guided experience through to Azure App Service. That's I think our biggest change with the Migration Assistant for Ignite, but I think Natasha might have some other things to mention on a more broad app service level.
I think App Service has done a lot of new releases as well. We have a new Premium V3 offering. I know Bharat already alluded to the Windows Container offering is now GA. And one particular feature I'm excited about because customers are going to really save a lot of money is reservation pricing. Depending on 1 year or 3 year contracts, depending on what you sign, it's a lot of savings. We also have Logic Apps, which is a codeless platform that is now running everywhere. It used to be cloud native only up until now. I think one thing to add to what Christina mentioned in the Migration Assistant, there's a lot of bug fixes that went in as well. We are able to, we monitor our GitHub repo very actively and have been looking at all the issues. So in addition to feature capabilities, lots of good fixes. Thanks.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Christina. And I think that's important for you to know. We don't want to just, ship features and grab eyeballs. We also want to make sure that our platform is reliable, secure, and safe for you to use. So we spend a lot of time in engineering quality into the platform, and we take a lot of pride when we ship those features out and those bug fixes out. This next one, Anant, I'm going to see if you can help us answer. It's a bit of a abstract question, but I think valuable to discuss. What would you say are the top 3 changes in methodology or approach for supporting services post-migration versus on-prem? And others too, please feel free to chime in too if you have thoughts on this one.
And the question is predicated on support, right, Abhishek? Like what changes with respect to how we support customers after they move to Azure?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? There are various dimensions, right? If you unpack this question, I'm not sure what was the actual driver or the crux of where the questioner was coming from, but there are various things, right? The first thing to think about is, do you need on an ongoing basis a level of managed services or support on an ongoing basis? A lot of customers actually work with us, for example, as part of the Azure Migration program. And then once we are done with our work, they might even say, hey, Mr. Partner, can you stay with us and manage our environment on our behalf, right? So that's one type of support that I've seen is becoming increasingly popular. And we've got a set of experts named Azure Expert MSPs, right? Or managed service providers who help customers with ongoing support. Then the other piece is just a lot of built-in capability in the platform, right? So you might be doing things a certain way on premises. Like a lot of customers say, hey, look, I mean, I spend a lot of time just backing up, patching, doing a lot of stuff on my own in my on-prem environment. And when you get to Azure, you might find that there are some built-in managed services capabilities, right? Where we offer you security monitoring or backing up or patching and a variety of other related automation that might actually change the way you run your operational processes, right? So that's another great built-in feature within the Azure platform, right? And then the third piece is we've got a variety of other support forums, be it self-serve, right, where you go to azure.com, or just calling in if you've got a tier 1 or tier 2 support plan on Azure, where you can get real-time help from our Azure experts as well. So in other words, to summarize what I said, there are a variety of options, right? The Azure Migration program can set you up directly with Microsoft for support, and then on an ongoing basis with a partner, right? There are built-in capabilities in the platform itself that can improve your life and get you out of undifferentiated sort of heavy lifting. And then the last piece is we always have direct or self-serve support options to Microsoft as well. So those are the three things that come to my mind, Abhishek, but I welcome others chiming in as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anant. I'm going to take two more questions. The first one, I'm going to send it to you, Raj. Let's see if we can get a quick answer in for this one. And it's a version of what I saw in the chat. If you're migrating over to Azure and you don't necessarily need a disk that's too big for your database, but you need a lot of IOPS, do you have a recommendation for our customers on what they should be considering?
Yeah, sure. So in order to get the right matching with IOPS is a critical characteristic when it comes to the SQL database workloads to begin with. I think one thing I have seen another question as well, like how do I really find the right skew that meet my performance, right? So that's a very critical step, whether it could be IOPS workload or a workload intense, memory intense workload or CPU. You should really do a DMA analysis, which really provides skew recommendations to you, which the way it does is we really read your performance data at some during the peak workload. And then for that performance workload, we try to match the skew which meets your IOPS needs, which meets your memory needs and compute needs to really give you the right skew that you can really land in the Azure. So that's a very critical step, that the post-migration performance is critical step. So I strongly recommend for these workloads to run the DMA assessment to find the right skew that can meet your needs. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Raj. I'm going to quickly switch back to our content. I do want to leave you with your session resources, but I'm also going to take the last question that I've been seeing on chat. How do you choose between Azure VM Service and Azure VMware Solution? I'm going to give you an answer on how we really believe. These are both Azure options. We engineer them and we invest in them to the same fidelity. We do believe the choice comes from where the customer is in their journey. If you're looking at extending your on-prem VMware capacity without having to change the paradigms of how you are working with your VMware environments or how you're managing them, do consider AVS. It's a great option. If you are looking to move over to the public cloud and are more open to VM, IaaS, PaaS offerings natively in Azure, you move to Azure Infrastructure Service and the PaaS services. The one thing that's consistent is tooling like Azure Migrate supports both your options. So you can now use Azure Migrate to perform discovery assessment for migration over to VMs or the SQL service in Azure, or if you want to perform an assessment for AVS. With that, I'm going to bring us to a close. I sincerely appreciate your time and for the engagement that you've given us in these last 30 minutes. And I also want to thank all our panelists for waking up early in their different time zones to answer all the questions. Thank you so much, and please do enjoy the rest of your Ignite. Thank you, and stay safe.